Didn't bring your you didn't bring your piece that I gave you. That's right. I've got copies here. You want to do it? Smelling yet? Did you bring your? Got yours? Did you bring your article?
No, it's right there on the
Here you are.
calendar.
Main woman here.
I did get bread and cucumber. Needs to be made on. For now.
We are streaming.
Oh, okay. Now? Oh, okay. Make sure we got two.
Got that, got out Friday and then got out Wednesday. And then summer school is already started.
Let's see how many I gotta hand out to people.
I got that. We didn't have enough in, so it's only 2 weeks long.
Was it what you gave that nice little, yeah, some off?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It is fresh.
It's online, and so people are listening to you. So be careful what you say. You can be heard, and I will name names, Ruthie.
No, we're not online because you went away.
Yes, no.
Oh, we're online.
Oh,
The screen is down there.
Not on there.
That's good.
Yeah, but they've already started the meditation. At least another, and he said on the.
Robert's were glad to be
I'm a little worried about finding this, but it seems like for us. They said that. It's not in your. Also, think it is.
Mm-mm.
It was, which is, he also doesn't support one of them. Such a hard, good job.
So you put that in, she did,
His hands are gone.
they're not convinced,
But
but
he
it's
understands one of years. So he never.
not my age.
He
plays again.
Let's go ahead and get started. The single page I gave you that was sitting at your seat just kind of gets us where we are tonight and what we're going to be doing. And I've included there the paragraph from last week's page. I've given you the working thesis for this whole thing. What in the world is going on? What's the problem? What's the matter? And so, in last week in that page I gave you, I said, there are two sides to the problem. There's the spiritual side and the practical side. The spiritual side, basically, is that our ancient and original sin is the rejection of God and His rule over us, and the insertion of ourselves in His place as our own arbiters of right and wrong. Most of the corrupting forces that wash over us have their origin in this original sin. Concerning the practical issue, well, talk about practical issues just a second. The spiritual issue is that we want to be God. We've thrown off God, and we want to do things the way we want to do things, and we want to exalt ourselves in every way. We want to eliminate all barriers and all limitations, and we want to remake reality according to our lights and whims and wishes. It really boils down to that. That's our tree. Think of that as our tree trunk. And we're going to talk about various isms that spring off from that tree trunk, branches that branch out. And so we'll talk about various manifestations of that sinful impulse, like in the individualistic spirit, individualism, consumerism. Tonight I'm going to talk about Gnosticism. So each week there will be a different ism, just to talk about the manifestation of that original sin issue. That is the bottom line, spiritually speaking. We want to do things the way we want to do things. We want to mold and shape all of reality according to what we want. And that stands behind everything that's wrong in the world today. So you can all go home and be happy now, right? You got the answer. But no, that's really true. And so that's the spiritual side of the issue. The practical side of the issue is that the world is always changing, practically speaking, i.e., technology is always changing the world. Um, you know, the way we do things, how we do things, what we learn, and how we apply it to how we live, and how we improve our living or change our living. That's what technology does. And technology doesn't just mean computers. We talked last week about our going from uh, a word-oriented world to an image-oriented world. Well, the word-oriented world, the word on the page and focusing on that was a replacement for the oral, the hearing culture. Way, 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 way long ago, we didn't write things down. We told stories and we remembered. We had great memories and we memorized everything and we spoke from that. So we didn't have any need to write anything down because we knew it in our heads and we told it and we shared it. And we didn't have this proliferation of information that we have now because we have things written down and now we have the digital age. We had limited understanding of things, knowledge, but we lived with that knowledge and we talked, we listened to each other, we communicated through the spoken word. So technology is basically when one way of living gets replaced by another way of living through various sorts of methodologies, mechanisms, instruments, and that type of thing. And so we said last week, that um, technology, we're always dealing with technology, new technology. The problem of our age uh, is that we're dealing with so much new technology that we're disoriented. Every time something changes, it takes us a while to get our lives wrapped around it. Now, when you've got, 100 different things that are changing all at once, then you become very confused. Um, and as we talked about last week in one of those pages we read, um, you know, part of the problem is, we want control. We want to have control over things. That's the way we're made. Um, and technology makes things out of control. And so we'll often turn to technology to bring things back into control. But that means that we're making ourselves anxious again because we're changing things again. It's a vicious cycle. We keep embracing technology to fix things, but that technology changes more things that we want to fix with more technology. And so it just keeps going on and on and on and on. And so, we've lived in such times of massive change in the past 100 years or so that we are disoriented, you know, as human beings in the world. Um, I mentioned that last week, and I mentioned about my grandmother. She was born, my mother's mother was born 1900 or 1901, I'm not sure. Um, and she died in 1983. So she saw a lot of this change over the course of time. I like to think of her life and think about what I know of American life, over that course of time and how much things have changed. We have this picture. Um, it's uh, it's a picture that won a prize for the Atlanta Journal uh, of a best memory. Um, and it's printed in the paper in 1948. But this is my I guess my great grandfather was W.A. Aycock, um, and so it's a picture, as you'll see, of an old car. I'll pass it around for you to see in just a second. But my grandmother's sitting in it. This is 1909, the picture, 1909, and so my great grandfather was explaining the picture of our family was made by the Atlanta Journal and printed in the Journal in the fall of 1909. We were visiting that is Mrs. Harry Davis, which is my grandmother. This must have been he must have been writing this note to my mother or to her sister. We were visiting your mother's aunt, Mrs. L.P. Grant, on Killian Street near Grant Park. I entered this car in the New York Herald Atlanta Journal dedicatory tour over the National Highway from New York to Atlanta in October 1909. And I made a perfect score, my car being number 7, meaning 7th entry in that first long distance auto tour in the nation. We were living in Aycock, Florida at the time, which was named for the company that they had, where I was president of Aycock Lumber Company, manufacturing yellow pine lumber. Shortly after this picture was made, we moved back to Moultrie. That's where their roots were. So you can, but I mean, imagine that, she's in the back seat, the dark hair. And 1909, and she's in a car in this first, amazing new thing that's taking place, right? And you're traveling from Atlanta to New York on a, major highway built for that. Um, well, go to 1983 and all the things that are, TV and I mean everything that's just changed in that course of time. Um, so we've been through a period of transformation. I mean, every period goes through, transformation and sometimes major transformation. But for us, in the modern age, it seems like it's just multiplied. Um, and so that, when we think about what's behind a lot of our troubles, what's behind the, you know, our sense of unease in this age, um, it really can be, you know, um, spoken of in terms of the amount of technological change that has washed over us as a society, um, over the course of that past 100 years. Um, and so, that's part of what makes us uneasy, what changes the way we live. Every technology changes the way we live our lives. So anyway, I'd mentioned that last week, and I just thought I'd bring that to show you. I mean, that's to me, it's just still amazing for me to think about her life and what all she went through in terms of the change of things. We talked last week about one technological age shift um, from a focus in our communication from the word to the image, which Neil Postman, a social critic, talks about in his book "Amusing Ourselves to Death." And I gave you a handout that we're going to look at here, and I've got uh, copies of that handout. Where did I put them? Did I leave them on the page? Oh, thank you. Yeah, if you don't have that, you can just pass that around if you don't have it. Yeah, you've got it. You all got it. You need it.
Yeah.
That one.
So Postman's critique talks about um, how we moved from a word-centered society to an image-centered society, and the primary manifestation of that being the advent of television, the television age. So this book is dated. I mean, we're way past the television age, but it's still, and the main reason I bring it up is I just want you to think critically in terms of what we're talking about here. Um, but that change, he said, to an image format rather than that word-centered format, um, really kind of brought on the need to entertain, or the sense that we should make all our communication entertaining. And it's not that he has any problem with entertainment. His problem is that we've allowed the entertainment ethos to dominate in every area of life. We've not asked the questions: is this really appropriate to do? On this with this technology, will this technology change the way we do what we do? Um, and that's his major premise in all his work. He's written several books. And you've heard this other places, I'm sure. Rather than just embrace technology that comes up just because it's there, we ask questions. How is this going to change us? How is this going to make life different? And what is this going to take away, even as this gives us something new? Every technology gives us something new, but every technology changes things in negative ways as well. So this isn't a discussion to say, oh, just throw away everything, throw your TV sets out the window, or throw your computer out the window, or whatever. It's about thinking about how your embrace of those various technologies, how you can do that in such a way that you preserve what is good while mitigating, the negative aspects of it. So we'll look at the article together. Please don't take offense if any of these people are your heroes from the past. Um, you know, he's got his opinions and they're pretty strong. And if he's speaking ill of one of your heroes, please, don't get offended. Just read on, press on, and try to take in the whole of what he's talking about here.
Who did you say wrote this?
Neil Postman. He was a social critic. He's written a bunch of books. New York. I think he's from New York, or I think that's where he was based in his. He was a university professor somewhere. I can't think exactly what it was now. He is dead and gone now, but he was prominent during the days when I was college to seminary. So we start talking about an evangelical preacher on TV who goes by the name of Reverend Terry. I don't know who she is, but he talks about her. She appears to be in her early 50s and features a coiffure of which it has been said that it cannot be mussed, only broken. Reverend Terry is energetic and folksy and uses a style of preaching modeled on early Milton Berle. When her audiences are shown in reaction shots, they are almost always laughing. As a consequence, it would be difficult to distinguish them from audiences, say, at the Sands Hotel in Las Vegas, except for the fact that they have a slightly cleaner, more wholesome look. Reverend Terry tries to persuade them, as well as those at home, to change their ways by finding Jesus Christ. To help her do this, she offers a prosperity campaign kit, which appears to have a dual purpose. As it brings one nearer to Jesus, it also provides advice on how to increase one's bank account. This makes her followers extremely happy and confirms their predisposition to believe that prosperity is the true aim of religion. Perhaps God disagrees. As of this writing, Reverend Terry has been obliged to declare bankruptcy and temporarily halt her ministries. He goes on to talk about Pat Robertson, and then he's going to talk about Jimmy Swaggart there. And, talking about the 700 Club, probably you all have seen that at some point along the way. It's still owned, isn't it? Okay. I've not looked at it. I don't, I remember what it used to look like, and he gives a description of it that jives with what I remember from those days. It was basically, a religious talk show kind of program. And he talks about how he carried it out. Jimmy Swaggart, he also talks about, y'all remember Jimmy Swaggart, I'm sure. And you can read about his critique of him, or you already have if you read it during the week. On the next page over, that second paragraph, that is, it is the perfect television sermon, theatrical, emotional, and in a curious way comforting, even to a Jewish viewer. He's been talking about what Swaggart has done for television. Bless his heart, is not congenial to messages of naked hate. For one thing, what he means by that is, if you're going to have a following and keep it, you're going to have to, you're going to preach to your audience, and usually you're going to hold your punches on some things, because if you want them to keep watching, you don't want to offend them. And that's one of the problems with television interfacing with religion like this. For another, haters with reddened faces and demonic gestures merely look foolish on television, as Marshall McLuhan observed years ago, and Senator Joseph McCarthy learned to his dismay. Television favors moods of conciliation and is at its best when substance of any kind is muted. Remember what we talked about last week, the Douglas Lincoln debates, and how those debates went on for hours. The 2-3 hours, one person just speaking, and then the rebuttal would be an hour in and of itself. You can't do that on TV. People will change the channel. Yeah. So television favors moods of conciliation at its best when and is at its best when substance of any kind is muted. It's just not the right forum for doing substantive conversation. Again, television has a place and can be used in many good ways, but it's not meant for every type of, communication, not meant for every kind of forum. go down to the next paragraph. There are at present 35 television stations owned and operated by religious organizations, but every television station features religious programming of one sort or another. To prepare myself for writing this chapter, I watched 42 hours of television's version of religion, mostly the shows of Robert Schuller, Oral Roberts, Jimmy Swaggart, Jerry Falwell, Jim Baker, and Pat Robertson. Interesting there, uh, just who all, and this is the 80s, 70s, 80s. Interesting who was most prominent then. I was listening earlier today to an interview of a book review, um, and he was talking. The book was written about radio broadcasts of ministers, and goes back to the Fulton Sheen days, the Catholic. I don't know if y'all know Fulton Sheen, and he started off on radio in terms of gaining a big audience before he had some television exposure. But then also a Lutheran evangelist who was on the radio in the 40s, 30s, and 40s. Um, and and I'd never heard of him before. And if you listen to them, I almost started to have us listen to that, but it was a little bit too long. If you listen to them preach, and then you think about the preaching here, there's a substantive difference in terms of the content, um, and the impact. And part of that surely is related to radio versus TV, but part of it's related to you know the that going from a word oriented culture to an image oriented culture as well. Um, I may give you a couple of minutes of that at some point to let you hear that difference. Um, anyway, 42 hours were entirely unnecessary. 5 would have provided me with all the conclusions, of which there are two. They're fairly to be drawn. The first is that on television, religion, like everything else, is presented quite simply and without apology as an entertainment. Everything that makes religion an historic, profound, and sacred human activity is stripped away. There's no ritual, no dogma, no tradition, no theology, and above all, no sense of spiritual transcendence. On these shows, the preacher is tops. God comes out as second banana. And he has to. I mean, who's in the camera? Who's the main person people are there to watch? It's the pastor. It's the preacher. God is invisible. And so, the one person is the representative of God that you see. And so inadvertently it becomes, you become focused on that person. That's why TV preachers of the old day, I mean, we're all TV preachers now because everybody's got their own YouTube channel. But TV preachers of days past, became celebrities, and some still are. Um, you know, and that celebrity driven nature of things alters not only what you do at church on Sundays, but also how you carry out your ministry as a church. Um, the it's funny as I was reading that again last night, made me think. I remember watching a Catholic mass on TV on the Catholic channel, Trinity or something like that. I think it is. There's a Catholic channel, and I remember just flipping through it one night and looking and watching a Catholic mass. That that doesn't translate because people are going up to receive communion. That's the main part of the service. Everything else is liturgy, and the the priests aren't focused on the camera. They're not the main thing. Celebrating communion, which is the literal body for them, literal body and blood of Christ. That's the main thing, and so that's the main focus. Well, that doesn't translate on TV. Um, and so it struck me when I was reading that, if you have all of that, then it doesn't come across TV very well. You have to have an entertainment kind of focus. Now, again, this is dated in our day and age. Just about everybody has a YouTube version of their worship service, and I think most of those services aren't geared towards the people out there. They're geared towards the service, and the YouTube presentation of it is just kind of a over the shoulder look at it. and presenting it to people from the church who want to watch it, but they can't be there that day. So it's not really we're not really trying to reach the masses, through intentionally through the program. We're worshiping God, and people are joining us by way of the YouTube feed. So it's a different kind of mindset today. Second conclusion is that this fact has more to do with the bias of television than with the deficiencies of these electronic creatures. It's true enough that some of these men are uneducated, provincial, and even bigoted. They certainly do not compare favorably with well-known evangelicals of an earlier period, such as Jonathan Edwards, George Whitefield, and Charles Finney. And that's the point I was just making a second ago, who were men of great learning, theological subtlety, and powerful expositional skills. Nonetheless, today's television preachers are probably not greatly different in their limitations from most earlier evangelicals or from many ministers today whose activities are confined to churches and synagogues. What makes these television preachers the enemy of religious experience is not so much their weaknesses, but the weaknesses of the medium in which they work. In other words, television just isn't really suited to lead people into worship. It's just not. And so you have to alter the service in order to make it fit the medium. And that's his whole point about using TV as a means of engaging people in the worship of God. And again, their aim is probably different than what he's talking about here, but that still I think rings true. Most Americans, including preachers, have difficulty accepting the truth, if they think about it at all, that not all forms of discourse can be converted from one medium to another. It is naive to suppose that something that has been expressed in one form can be expressed in another without significantly changing its meaning, texture, or value. Much prose translates fairly well from one language to another, but we know that poetry does not. We may get a rough idea of the sense of a translated poem, but usually everything else is lost, especially that which makes it an object of beauty. The translation makes it into something it was not. And so he's just making the point, not every medium should be embraced for every activity that we're trying to carry out. It's a logical kind of thing, but too often we just embrace the technology and say, oh, how can we use that, to further the church's ministry without thinking, does it detract in some way from the church's ministry by embracing it? Always ask the question what that technology is going to do.
So I guess that covers the folks who say King James is the only one and all these others are worthless because the translation doesn't carry the original meaning. Because we know that Jonathan Edwards wouldn't come over well on today's TV.
Right.
That's for sure.
Right.
So that should apply, I guess, to some folks, even to a Bible version, I would think.
Yeah, I guess you could do that. Yeah.
You get that argument all the time
Sure.
from certain folks. Yeah. So they don't think one translation.
Most of those folks, though, know that the King James came straight from God and was laid on the rock. So,
To go back to the idea of entertainment, don't you think that some of those tent revivals were an awful lot like the television
some of those what?
tent revivals?
Oh, gosh, yeah.
So, I mean, it's
Yeah.
not just a modern television. There's always been that certain kind of.
Right. How do we catch people's attention? How do we? Yeah, I absolutely.
Well, in fact, some tent revivals might be better than an actually Sunday morning service, the way some of them seem to affect people.
Well, they can affect in multiple ways, but I was just thinking in terms of some focus on the revival preacher.
Right.
And
Right. Oh yeah. Billy Sunday was a famous revivalist early in the 1900s, I think, and was well known for his antics. And as much for his antics as for the substance of his preaching. And he became a celebrity figure. So the impetus towards being a celebrity figure has always been there, I think. And that's one of the dangers in preaching, as I've said, again, ego gets gets the hold of you. And it's a powerful thing to stand up and preach God's word. Um, so it can it can go to your head quite easily, quite quickly. Um, so yeah, it can, that impulse, I, I guess, is captured and is multiplied through what TV was able to pull off, I think. And now you think about podcasts. Um, I mean, you know, there's so many different new forms of getting your message out there and being that celebrity person. Um, and it's just expanded from the TV to the computer with all the various manifestations of that present there. Um, so um, even though the TV preacher that we're talking about here has been, is no longer the primary thing, it still manifests itself in our digital technology today. Um, on page 118, um, he goes down halfway and talks, Billy Graham. Billy Graham has written, is the most powerful tool of communication ever devised by man. Each of my primetime specials is now carried by nearly 300 stations across the US and Canada, so that in a single telecast, I preach to millions more than Christ did in his lifetime. To this, Pat Robertson adds, to say that the church shouldn't be involved with television is utter folly. The needs are the same, the message is the same, but the delivery can change. It would be folly for the church not to get involved with the most formative force in America. I think that's a dangerous statement. um,
Particularly today, since we do,
yeah.
since we do so much on Sundays now via a little camera. Well, I mean, I'll be honest, I doubt if Ebenezer Lutheran will ever get to 100 people again on the Sunday morning service. We're lucky if we get to 50 because people are home. And so that sentence, yeah, I don't know. I don't see that sentence.
It's the trade-off.
Yeah, but it's not a formative thing.
Right.
Based on that sentence.
There are several assumptions at work there. That is, that all that matters is, the preached word. And that the gospel, is just a message, that there's nothing else involved. And I would say that's too reductionistic. Um, and the Christian life is not just about, as we've talked about on many occasions, it's not just about, praying a prayer and bing bang boom, you're saved and everything's good, and you can keep on staying at your home and living your life, on your own, Lone Ranger Christianity. That's what television, that's what, the YouTube, that's what it encourages. Stay at home, have it your way. You don't need a church. You don't need to be involved with other people. That's way too messy. That's way too involved. And half those people you don't really like anyway. So, just stay home. Stay
I
home.
don't want to be embarrassed. There are some songs on some Sunday mornings that will make me cry. It wouldn't do if I was sitting at home in front of the TV.
Everybody has a reason they don't want.
And at the same time,
They don't want
yeah,
to show up to church.
Yeah, if something in service makes you upset or makes you cry, you'll probably stay home and watch it on TV because you will not be embarrassed. You won't embarrass yourself.
Well, and that's why people. I mean, I've had somebody way back who didn't want to get baptized because she thought it was too embarrassing. I'd taken a bath in front of other people, and I wasn't smart enough to say, yeah, that's right, that's what it is, and you should be embarrassed. I mean, you should, this is humility. This is, you need to let go of your pride. Um, you know, but again, the gospel is responding to Christ, is committing your life to Christ and living in community. As we said before, when you become a Christian, you're made a part of the church, and you're given to a church to help you grow up into the fullness of Christ. Growing up matters, and so presence matters. On the front end of things, it matters. And so yes, preach the gospel, but those people need to be in church. And that's always been, the Billy Graham Association. They always, to their credit, tried when they came in and did a set of services. They would try to reach out to the churches and find places they could send people to. But that's just a stopgap kind of thing. Um, because how many of those people actually went to another church, and how many people thought, well, I've prayed the sinner's prayer, and I'm saved and I'm good. And so if I go to church, if I find a church somewhere that I can be a part of, well, maybe I'll do that. But if not, it's no big deal. I'm saved. It diminishes what salvation is. Um, so that's on the front side of thing. The other side of thing is, um, in worship, there's so many experiential elements to it that you just can't reproduce on screen. You just can't. There are feelings that you get. There is that three-dimensional aspect of being in church with other people. Um, there is seeing people around you, how they respond, or being there and hearing the word and being able to see the preacher preach. Those things matter. But one of the most religious experiences that I've had outside of church uh, um, was a James Taylor concert. Amy and I went to with some friends from Farmville 30 years ago. Um, and I mean, it was a great concert. And, you just felt like you were part of this group. You just felt that kind of sense of community. You couldn't get that on TV. I mean, yeah, you could enjoy the music and all that kind of stuff, but it was being there with all those other people and joining them as they were singing the songs, or joining with them as they were clapping and asking for this song or that song or whatever. I mean, it's that communal experience that you can't capture secondarily. You have to be there to get it. Well, it's the same thing, I think, in worship. um, I remember a long time ago somebody talking about hearing the children pray the Lord's Prayer in worship, and how that just touched their heart. You're not going to hear the children pray the Lord's Prayer on YouTube. You just can't. Um, and so it's not the same thing. It's not the same thing. And again, TV, it's not that TV's bad. I mean, TV may be bad in a lot of ways, but it's not that, throw it out the window, that kind of thing. But it's not always good for everything. And if it encourages people to stay home, then, and not feel the need to be committed to a church family, then it's not good. It's counteractive. Let's see.
What,
Go ahead.
what he said on page 119, where it talks, at the top of the page, it talks about uh, the space in which it's conducted being invested with some kind of sacredness.
Yes.
But if you jump down the page, I get a better feeling for what he's talking about when he says that you're listening to this in your own living room,
Right.
or bathroom,
Right.
or bedroom, and you can be walking around eating or
Doing push-ups.
push up, and that takes away
Right.
from it really takes away from
Right.
the whole experience.
When it's in your space, then you control the externals. And so, you can be doing your taxes while you're worshiping.
And it's just not the same.
Right.
It's-
Right. And that's what TV allows you to do.
yeah.
And so that's what the screen allows you to do. And so that's another way in which it's just not the best means
Yeah.
for carrying out worship.
I see better when he
Yeah.
stated that.
I want to kind of push through this because you can read most of this on your own, or you have read it on your own. Let's see. Talks about the cost of things on page 120, and he talks about how much money comes in. Um, uh, you know, I mentioned that next to bottom paragraph. I mentioned this only to indicate why it is possible for these preachers to make the high production costs of any strictly commercial program. And match than they do, most of the religious shows feature sparkling fountains, floral displays, choral groups, and elaborate sets. All of them take as their model for staging some well-known commercial program. Jim Baker, for example, uses the Merv Griffin show as this guide. More than occasionally, programs are done on location in exotic locales with attractive and unfamiliar vistas. In addition, exceedingly handsome people are usually in view, both on the stage and in the audience. Robert Schuller is particularly partial to celebrities, especially movie actors like Efrem Zimbalist Jr. and Cliff Robertson, who have declared their allegiance to him. Not only does Schuller have celebrities on his show, but his advertisements use their presence to attract an audience. Indeed, I think it's fair to say that attracting an audience is the main goal of these programs, just as it is for the A-Team in Dallas. I was watching after reading this. I went and watched a video of a church I'm familiar with. I won't name names since we're on YouTube, but I went to check it out. And the church has gone through a transition period, and a new pastor has come on, replacing a very popular pastor that was there before. And I know from somebody who's in that church that he wanted to redo everything, to rebrand it, his way. And so this person told me that the church spent, it was in the tens of millions of dollars to refurbish it's not even a sanctuary, it's a civic center kind of place. To get all the technical, sound equipment and light equipment and all that kind of stuff, just to get it all set up. I mean, space age stuff. There are churches that have satellite church, viewing places in big cities. So if you're a big time preacher in Richmond and you're very popular, well, you can have, the theater on Sunday morning over on the other side of town, where people can come and watch the show there. And so they've invested in high tech audio video stuff. And so spending tens of millions of dollars is nothing for these churches to do, because again, you want to get your audience, you want to keep your audience. Watching this service, I watched it for a little bit, and very attractive. If I'm just Joe average person, it's very impressive stuff. Everybody was beautiful. There was nobody who sang or led who didn't look just absolutely perfect. Suit, tie, dresses. Everybody, the choir was 75 strong at least, maybe 100. They had a band as well as an orchestra. Everybody in the choir, all the men had on suits and ties. Every single one of them was the same. All the women had on dresses. Every single one of them was the same. The band guys, the ones playing guitar and whatnot, were dressed in black, but nice and neat. You didn't see a tattoo anywhere. They looked immaculate. And the people who sang, they had ensembles that sang, during the opening part of the service. They were all professional quality people. I'm just telling you, there's no way that they weren't. And there were 2 or 3 of these groups that came on. So I'm thinking they must spend tens of thousands of dollars every Sunday just to put on the show. And this person told me it feels like it's a show now. But it's high quality stuff. It is slick, it is attractive, but it is, they're spending big bucks in order to attract a crowd. You have to. So that part of this, I think, where in the old days, they had the fountains and the Crystal Cathedral and all those kinds of oh well kind of things. Well, it's still in play today. The one thing that drives me nuts about it is, and of course, there's no pulpit, there's no communion table, there's no religious furniture whatsoever there, and it's all dark. The background is black. There's not a window in sight, which that's the last thing I would want, is to be in a dark room. And it made me think of the Revelation passage we read a couple of weeks ago where there's no more night, right? It's always day, it's always bright, it's always light because it's only the Lord who is present there. Why in the world we're going to dark stage? But I know why they do, because it makes all the colors pop on all the people who are leading the service. So money. Yeah, I mean you got to have it. If you're gonna attract the people you want to attract.
Well, when you turn into certain preachers, like way back, I used to listen to Jerry Falwell.
Yeah.
Well, me, he was more of a political type preacher, and he favored one side all the time.
Oh yeah.
Well,
And that's the way.
a little bit of a turn.
That's the way this pastor is in this church that my friend was telling me about. He takes very strong stands on all the political issues. So
In the church. Oh, I
yes.
believe I know.
He preaches on Sunday morning. So the last paragraph there, or the last little blurb there on page 121, he says, I believe I'm not mistaken in saying that Christianity is a demanding and serious religion. When it's delivered as easy and amusing, it is another kind of religion altogether.
I think almost the essence of this whole article is in the paragraph above that when it says, well, it's talking about religious leaders, but it says they offered people that the television people and all the people he's been talking about offer people what they want, not what they need.
Right.
And
Right. Right. Yes.
That other people, Jesus.
Yeah. Yeah.
What they need. Yeah. User friendly, not
Yeah.
so much.
And again, when you're TV demands that you have an audience, because you got to keep making money in order to keep the whole thing going. And so it's just it's like an addiction. To get a better high, you got to put more money into it, and you got to keep having a better high because your competitors down the street, by the way, are doing what you're doing too. And a matter of fact, they're doing a little bit better than you're doing it. So now you've got to up your ante, somehow or another. And so it becomes, Walmart versus the mom and pop store, in many respects. I'll let y'all finish reading the rest of it on your own if you on your own time. I wanted to push through to one other thing. The main thing I want to pull out of this, and again, I said the one ism that I want us to think about today is Gnosticism. You've heard that term a lot in our in church, and it's a big coverall kind of thing. One at the base of it all is kind of a denigration of the physical material aspect of reality, in favor of an overemphasis on the spiritual virtual kind of reality. And I think that's one of the isms that we're dealing with in our world today, is that we don't value that three-dimensional aspect of things. Everything to me that that's wrong with this kind of way of coming at church and all, is that it makes presence, optional. And to me, if you go, when we read next week the Acts 2 passages about the early church, if you read at the end of the chapter, the key verses there are they were together each and every day worshiping in the temple. They were together eating. They were together. That communal aspect of being together, that's what you can't reproduce in this kind of stuff. And that's what's being lost overall. Again, this is just one way of looking at what we're dealing with, as Christians, what we're losing touch with. And that is the physical, three-dimensional presence part of things.
I know when Debbie was sick and we watched the church services on YouTube, it wasn't the same as being here.
Right.
And we talked about that a lot.
Yeah. You just can't reproduce it in that kind of format.
Now, we've mostly been talking about services here. What what do y'all think about those commercials or promos back, particularly at football time when they were doing Super Bowl? And I can't remember who sponsored them, but they were focused on Jesus.
Yes.
Real short
Yeah,
commercials.
Uh-huh.
And I, when they first started showing them, I thought, boy, that's different, you know. And I don't know if it was Mormons. I don't know who promoted them, but it was certainly different commercials.
yeah, yeah. Well, I'm gonna, because I'm trying. I wanted you to hear something tonight. I want you to leave on something really different. Um, but I'm making the point with this, the power of presence. So, um, just to give you the background on it, um, Garrison Keeler, the Prairie Home Companion, love listening to that all along the way. And there's something about radio that's better than TV because you have to use your imagination. Um, but this particular um, monologue is a Thanksgiving monologue, and it's fun just on the face of it, but it really drives home the power, I think, of presence, of being there, of having memories of being there. So anyway, if you don't get anything out of it, you'll enjoy it, I think, if nothing else. So let me cue this up. My technological. Okay.
I grew up in a house with
15 minutes long.
5 brothers and sisters, but I associate Thanksgiving with
Everybody
getting
hear
into
that?
a car and driving north to Lake Wobegon with a hot dish in the trunk and 2 or 3 pies. And I miss that part of Thanksgiving now that all those people are gone whose house we used to drive to. We'd drive, and if we were lucky, there was snow on the ground, and you could see the roll of the land, and the grain of the grain stubble in the fields, and pass by little herds of Holsteins gathered around the hay bale, and poke each other in the back seat as much as you could without your parents noticing. So much has changed since then that I realize now I have to explain to my grandsons what snow fence was. You just don't see it anymore. It used to be everywhere, a part of the landscape, and now it hardly exists. Vertical battens, red wood battens, tied together by 3 strands of twisted wire. And why we put it up, and where. And now I'll have to explain to them, too, what subsistence farming was. Though that's not what we called it, it was just how our relatives lived. They raised their own food on a farm. They had some pigs, and they had a lot of chickens. They always had a few geese for the holidays. They had a few cows, a big vegetable garden, and by this time of the year, all of the ball jars with the cur lids were filled in the basement and the cellar, lined up in rows. I'm going to have to explain to these kids all about that and why we drove north for Thanksgiving and how, when we did, their father, when he was a little boy, stood in the front seat. There were no seat belts. He just stood there as we drove 60 miles an hour down the road. We really made our guardian angels work for us back then. So much has changed since then. I was walking along 11th Street last night and I passed one of those doorways where smokers are huddled like deportees. Had a big whiff of tobacco smoke, which brought back memories of Southeast Minneapolis and somebody's apartment filled with great hairy-legged English majors and intellectuals, men holding big tumblers of whiskey in their hands and big plumes of blue smoke coming out of them. I see those people now, and They don't smoke, they don't drink. When we talk, they talk about people they ran into at the club this morning. They talk about going off and running in the 10K English major race. English majors didn't used to run, they sat, they smoked. This has all changed since then. We don't go out playing touch football ferociously on Thanksgiving afternoon anymore for fear of tearing our Achilles tendons and walking with a limp for months and months. And we don't sit and eat like farmhands at the table anymore. We've had too many food related nocturnal experiences. Life has diminished for us. That's the story of a man in the twilight years. Thanksgiving was just more exciting when I was a child, not only for the touch football, but also for the fact that there were so many children in those houses, they could not possibly be supervised. And so, after the blessing was said and the food was passed, you put a little pat of butter on the tip of your knife and you drew it back and you flicked it at your sister. And you knew how to do this so that this landed on her forehead. It stuck to her forehead. She didn't cry out. She knew the rules of the game. You watched her closely, but then you got distracted eating. And you heard the tinkle of ice cubes in the water pitcher. And all of a sudden, she was right there. She was behind you. It was too late. The ice was down the back of your neck. You opened up your shirt tail and you let it out onto the floor. Your father looked at you from the head of the table, gave you the hairy eyeball, but you just put your head down, you waited, you bided your time, and you looked up and here were cranberries incoming. Nowadays, there's so few children. You have families with just one or two or three children, and they are over supervised. Obedience, my children, is not what made America great. Think about that. An independent spirit, joyfulness, certain sense of mischief and inventiveness. Thanksgiving back then was under the complete rule of great women, great aunts, dowager queens. The Queen Mother was in charge of Thanksgiving. She had been planning this for a long time. And when you grew up and married and had a little child and you called the Queen Mother, say the week before, and you said, "Can I bring something for Thanksgiving?" She said, "You're calling me now?" I've had this planned for weeks. And you knew that she did. You said, "Well, I could bring a pie." She said, "I didn't know that you made pies." And there was a chilled silence, which meant that you could not be trusted to bring a pie. You were not a pie type of person. You were the sort of person who would purchase a pie. And what would we need that for, possibly? So you put yourself under her control when you went to her Thanksgiving. And say when you got into your 40s and you had a perfect attendance record now for your entire life, and you called her and you said that maybe, not this year, but maybe some year soon, you might like to celebrate Thanksgiving in your own home. There was a long silence. And she said, "You just do whatever you want to do. You just go ahead. I would never want to think that my children came home for Thanksgiving because they felt they were under some sort of obligation. Believe me, you are not. I would rather sit and eat a frozen dinner off a TV tray than feel that I was compelling people to come and spend Thanksgiving with their mother. I could just sell the house. I could go to the Good Shepherd home. I'm sure I would find friends there who would be happy to spend Thanksgiving with me. And so year after year, you got in your car and you drove to your Thanksgiving. And so a whole generation of women my age grew up not knowing how to roast a turkey, not knowing how to make a pie crust. These women were barely allowed into the kitchen. They were allowed only to mash potatoes and then only under close supervision. I moved away to New York City where Thanksgiving is just whatever you want to make it. You just can spend the day in your pajamas. You can have Chinese food in little white cardboard cartons and watch movies on the classic movie channel. Call that Thanksgiving if you like. Nobody really cares. And while I was gone, the generation of dowager queens died off one by one. By one, they went down like tall trees. And when I came back to Minnesota, I found that suddenly I was needed. I was needed in the kitchen. The women my age couldn't cook, and there was a whole younger generation of feminist women who were proud of their inability to so much as boil an egg or put bread into a toaster. And so I found myself womping up Thanksgiving for my family, getting an enormous 50-pound turkey as big as a bathtub, and spending days poring over recipe books and making the greatest Thanksgiving dinner ever made, and making an incredible dressing out of sourdough breadcrumbs and 14 different herbs and spices and onions and venison sausage and and an olive oil so virginal that it had never been aware of male olive oil whatsoever. Putting together this amazing thing in blanched hazelnuts and so forth, and spending days making pie crust over and over and over until I got it right, and making real mincemeat pie with real meat in it. And my family sat down and they ate it in silence. Nobody can hurt you like people you love. Strangers can be kind and sweet as can be. It's your own family who can put the knife in your back. They sat and they ate the most wonderful Thanksgiving dinner ever created in Ramsey County. And they said, "What was in Aunt Elsie's dressing? Do you remember? It was so savory. It was so delicious. What did she put in that? Did she put gravy? Well, she put sage in, of course, and there was chopped onions and some kind of wild rice, I think. It was so good. I made the most beautiful Thanksgiving dinner, and they sat and they reminisced about Thanksgiving of days gone by. It was a great Thanksgiving, though, that my Aunt Elsie made. We went to their house, Uncle Don and Aunt Elsie. We could smell the turkey when we walked in. We brought our pies, brought our hot dish. My Uncle Don sat on the couch watching the Thanksgiving football game. We left him with the whole couch because he was a big man and he tended to move with the play. And he got really excited when he watched football. And he would cry out, "You call that? That's not holding. They've been holding all day, all afternoon. And now one of our guys holds out his arm and somebody runs into it and they call that holding. That's not holding." And he would demonstrate to me the difference between holding and just running into somebody with their arm held out. As my aunt and her sisters pushed this beautiful Thanksgiving dinner toward the goal line, this feast of all feasts. They set it out on the linen tablecloth and lit the candles and brought us in from the game, whether it was halftime or not, sat us down, and my Uncle Don said the blessing to thank God for this good life. The officiating is lousy, and there are holes in the secondary, and the coaching is not that good, but life is good. God looks over us, and thank you for this meal. And we tuck into it. It was perfect in every way. My aunt served it to us as she apologized for it over and over. How the dressing had not come out as she wished. The turkey was a little drier than it should be. Somehow these candied yams weren't just what they had been last year. We ate this gorgeous dinner. It was followed by a period of lethargy, and then there was a second attack on the leftovers, and time passed. Some people went to sleep. My Uncle Art liked to tell the story of his conversion, how he used to be a drinking man, and then one day decided to rob a bank. He was so drunk he wasn't capable of robbing a 6-year-old child, but he drove down to the bank and he put a ski mask on, but the eye holes were in the back. He walked with gun drawn down the sidewalk and walked straight into a parking meter. Sort of jangled the family jewels, and he fell down on the sidewalk, and the gun went off and shot a hole in his windshield on the driver's side. And he looked at that hole in the windshield and he thought, if I had been sitting there, I would have been killed. So he came to Jesus that day. We had heard this story 10 or 15 or 20 times, as we had heard all of those stories over and over and over. We listened to them one more time, and then we had our dessert and we got into our car. My father and my mother sat in the front seat. The baby was on her lap. The twin sat in between them, the twin with the big head that I liked to bonk with my hand because it sounded like a watermelon. I sat in the back seat with my brother and my sister and the other twin who was likely to get car sick. And we pulled away to go home into the dark. We drove down the county road past the snowy fields. I leaned my head against my sister's shoulder to see if she was willing to accept this, and she was. I tried to stay awake because I knew that my parents often discussed interesting things on the way home. I tried to stay awake, but my eyes closed. My eyes closed with my head against her shoulder, and I slept all the way home.
Okay, well, that's that. Um, Presence, place, the three-dimensional aspect of life. We are made this way. That's why I brought that up. I mean, just listening to it and thinking about all the visuals of their ritual every year, going, traveling for Thanksgiving, being with family, hearing the same stories, doing all that kind of stuff. That's important to us. And whether it's the TV religion, or it's the internet, or it's this or it's that, all the technology that robs us, that keeps us, that encourages us not to be present and not to be engaged in the physical world of our relationships, that's bad for us. And so to me, that's one way that we respond to all the technological advances, to the spirit of this age, which says, virtual relationships they're fine, they're perfect. You can have a million of them, and it's the same thing as having real relationships. No, it's not. So that's one way to start thinking about how we respond to the world that we are dealing with each and every day. We are made for community. We're made for relationship. We're made to live into this glorious, beautiful creation God has given us. And so we need to do that.
And family.
Family, yes,
We need family.
absolutely, absolutely.
You know what my dad did when my mother would tell her tale over and over? It's according to how many times she told it. If it was 5, he'd go, she didn't see that, but he would.
Oh, goodness.
We'll head in another direction next week. And again, I want to do some fun things so that you're not just looking at, stuff. Andy Griffiths is going to show up somewhere along the way. You just wait. But anyway, and we'll pick up next week talking about this. We can add some more things to what we listened to and talked about and continue with it. If you can help put things up, that's fine. If you need to head on, that's okay too.
Well, me too.